In design award season, it's good to see the level of creativity on show by interior designers. But for me, it's not just creativity that I see, it's also the use of instinct. And how I define instinct is by that first gut feeling you have, that first initial impression you have to a situation, or it can be related to design. Whether you have a design scheme and you know if it's average or maybe if just a few minor tweaks here and there very quickly can help elevate the design of your project. You see, I believe that any success that I may have had in life attributed to be both being prepared, hardworking, but also fast decision making when it comes to certain problems. And mostly when it comes to whether it's design or business, it's all come down to many problem solving and this fast decision making. You're dealt with a scheme. How big is it? How big is the space? What's the scale? How you may fit certain things or may not fit certain things. What does the client want and don't want? These are all basically minor problem solving that I'm sure you're going through for each project. And it's that willingness to basically think fast. I feel like, at least for me, whenever I've come across a problem, I may have loads of different ideas of how to do things. But when I always look back, it's always the first instinct, the first decision, the first answer I had in my head is usually what I go for. So usually I think to get faster in life or faster in terms of your own success or your own projects, is basically just rely on that first. What I've found also is that everyone loves to have labels, whether asking, are you a creative or logical person? Are you more of a designer or are you more into procurement? Are you in branding or sales? And what I want to try to establish in the video is to not be so much into the extreme camps, but to use both sides, learn both logical and creative sides of yourselves, to be prepared and also to rely on in terms of your knowledge and expertise to think fast. It's about using instinct and preparedness to leverage both sides of yourself, from the creative to the logical. That's the way that I see myself operate, being a creative person before in the past and now more of a business person. For me, it's using both sides still of the brain. You see, I've actually got to terrible history not listening to bosses, not because I wanted to show off, but because I've always felt there was a better and more human way to handle certain situations. See, when I was 22, I lived and worked in Shanghai. Very weird scenario. I was young, didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I actually had a boss. Again, it's that instinct and preparedness. He comes with that MBA business background, allowing me to just do my own thing, to just let me go into the wild in probably the most weirdest sense possible. But I found it very bizarre. He's like invested in me to come over from UK to China with no experience whatsoever. And he just said, yep, just do it. I believe you're smart enough. Go ahead, you handle any situation that you come across. And then there was this very crazy scenario. Probably one of the first things I had to handle was a situation whereby a product was stuck in customs. So we were working for an Italian manufacturer making facade tiles, ceramic tiles, for facades. And this product was stuck in customs because it didn't pass certain testing when it comes to exports into China. So as you know, China makes everything for the world. The quality is either good or bad, depending on your disposition. But to actually import into China is very, very strict. It's like called a CCC certificate. And to enter this ceramic tile product into the market was determined by the level of radioactivity that was part of the natural stone making process. So, anything about natural materials, stone and minerals has a minor bit of radioactivity levels. It's never going to hurt anyone. It's just there. It's just stone around you. There's always marble around you. There's nothing's going to happen, but it's there. And for this particular product, because it was colored white, somehow white stone has more of these little levels involved. And when it was tested in, I think it was Nanjing, when it was tested there, basically it didn't pass through customs. And I had to go over there to try to get it through, speak to the people over there, because they were facing a situation where it was going to either be discarded, like thrown away, or to be sent back to Italy. Both scenarios not very good for the client and the project who relies on these to complete the building, let alone the interiors. This is complete the exterior part. So I went there, took a translator with me, didn't know what I was doing pretty much. So I blagged my way through. Somehow managed to persuade them to let it through. I got a pat on the back for my efforts, but I did say to my boss at the time that I don't think this is the last time you'll hear of this. And I was correct. Not soon later, we had a letter from the Beijing government demanding to see us. Of course, they're aware of what happened with that situation with customs. And they were basically considering to ban us to export into the China market. And this was back in 2012, where there's still a big allure with China. There still is now today. But back then, there's probably even more so in terms of growing emerging markets, especially with luxury, especially with high-end projects. So that would have been very damaging if that came to pass. Talking about instinct, I got no idea where my boss was about this scenario, and probably many others. Probably smelt trouble when it was coming, and he was either South America doing a business trip or on holiday or somewhere, but I had to go to Beijing by myself. And it did not help that this was probably the first and only time that I spoke to the CEO of the company. And he called me on a long train journey from Shanghai to Beijing. I think it was about 4 or 5 hours. And he said to me, James, whatever you do, be aggressive and don't let this happen. And people who know me well enough know that I'm not aggressive by nature. And on that train journey, I was mostly shitting myself because I didn't know what the hell I was going to do or say. I was trying to think of all these different scenarios, of this kind of imagine in my head how this may proceed if I say things this way or if I say things that way, and what the outcome would be after that. And most of the time, I only saw trouble. Yeah, it was pretty stressful, but I remember near the end of the journey, I was actually laughing to myself, like almost giggling to myself, a bit hysterical, this public train, because I was thinking that this was actually quite a silly or crazy scenario to be in for someone 22, 23 in such an important market as China. So the next morning, I still didn't know what to do. I remember the aggressive, try and be aggressive. So what did I do? I remember doing, like boxing, like jumping up and down, getting self pumped. I would do that sport outside just to get the blood flowing. And when I got to meet the counterpart, I actually think his name was Mr. Shen, knocked on the door, and then Mr. Shen opened, and I shook his hand, but also looked at him in the eye. And I could instantly tell that he was not proud to be there. He was not happy to be there. I think he was, not really happy to be in this situation either. It's going to be a difficult conversation with a supplier who probably was going to yell at him if he was if I was Italian in that sense, or listen to my CEO. So he wasn't, you could tell he wasn't comfortable basically. So, and I instantly knew what to do, oddly. Sat down, and what I said was, Mr. Chen, we fucked up. I need your help to fix things in the factory, to get things moving and back into the certified process that it should be to export into China. And my pitch was, I know after this committee, you're going to decide what to do in terms of punishment. I would rather you don't. But if you do, just a little. Don't, little. And after that, he kind of smiled, and then he took me out to have a nice Beijing duck lunch. A few weeks later, or maybe 1 or 2 weeks later, we got a letter saying that we were banned for just 2 weeks into the market. And for me, that was a fantastic result, because it probably took just as long to do the production process, but then also to ship it from Italy to China. So that was pretty good result. And again, I could have had all the preparedness in the world. I was trying really hard to prepare for that 5-hour journey the day before, even into the evening and the morning, still trying to think what I wanted to do. But in the end, the answer came just quickly, just in that instant. And rather just listen to the CEO and just going with it and maybe just do what the CEO said, didn't work. And I could blame, the CEO said me to be aggressive, and this is what happened. No, I decided to actually just say, look, it was our fault. We didn't mess up. And I think it's probably the best result we could have come out of in that situation, because we had no real leg to stand on in the first place. So I think that helped pull us through for sure. More recently, have you ever had a situation with a client who refused to pay or used delay tactics to pay up to get a project moving forward? So this rarely happens to me, but it happened on the project that probably didn't matter the most. It was 120K order, like a couple hundreds of likes from my understanding, from what I remember. So we would do a 50% deposit for production and 50% for the balance payment before collecting from the factory. So it was going to Dubai. So rather than shipping to the UK, we wanted to ship it from China. So it's fast for them to get it to Dubai or UAE quickly rather than bypassing through that route to get there. Production said it was ready, completed. I sent the payment invoice to the client, and the client said he'll pay. A few days passed. I do my usual phone call follow-up, and they said, "Oh yeah, it's fine. We're going to pay it soon." A few weeks later passed again, and after that second conversation, I kind of knew that they were doing delay tactics because prior to the project and order, we were being hurried to do a very tight deadline to meet. Even have a few days delayed payments. I knew that something was up, basically, or at least they were playing games. But it's something that you couldn't really outright say. I mean, I don't think anyone would say to a client unless you have evidence. So it was coming up maybe about 3 weeks to a month, and it was causing a lot of issues in production. If you imagine that many lights for a huge order in the logistics part of the factory, holding things up in terms of getting things out, in terms of stock, it's just basically there in the way. I was getting help from the head of the factory, also the sales director, get it through, but I'd like to try to keep things as calm as possible with the client as well, and just take on that stress or just ignore it basically. But it was getting to the point that I had to do something. But I still, again, you go thinking in terms of what to do and what not to do. I was painting and decorating the home, like the wall behind me, and I was in the evenings, my spare time, and I was painting, and I was like, I don't know, I was thinking of this, the answer. And I tried actually calling my boss to actually sign it off because it was a bold move for sure. I couldn't get through to him. He tried to call me. We kept missing each other in the evenings. And I knew I had to play this move that morning, basically. Like I couldn't wait for his approval or permission. So next morning, I sent an email to the client, copying the rest of his staff, questioning how serious he is. So I basically sent an email, hey, look, throughout this whole process, you've been very serious about this project, moving things forward. We've tried to match that ourselves, making sure the production was hit on time. So I don't understand why now there's these, delays, or it seems like you're not paying your word, or whatever. But basically you're delaying things on purpose. So I said, like, what's up? Do you want me to cancel this order and give you a refund? And almost immediately he emailed saying he's never been spoken that way. He felt insulted, and that for sure he's a serious person on a serious project. And within 2 hours, he basically wired the rest of the money and arranged a collection. I knew that this is why I called boss at the time, because I knew that if it didn't go well, and he basically played my bluff and took the refunds, I would have been fired straight away. Like they would have they would just fired me and say like, oh, that was a crazy fucking person, refund, we wouldn't do such a thing, sort of stuff. So no, it worked out. But I remember when I telling him, said boss later on, he's like, eyes like you couldn't believe that I said such a thing. So it's probably a good thing that I didn't tell him because it worked out, but probably would have blocked the move in the first place. So, I mean, basically, when it comes to that sort of instinct, again, with that scenario in China and this one, instinct is also related to risk. It's risky, sometimes to just think boldly, think in terms of decision making. It's weird. I mean, I talk about instinct and preparedness. So, you prepare, trying to think over scenarios, but when you work in a very difficult situations like the high pressure ones that I did, you try and think of all the scenarios that play out. You're playing these scenarios, and then suddenly you just get this instinct, like the moment this is the only way. Like you just feel that it's right. And what I found is, whenever I had that scenarios where I've had such a strong instinct or strong feeling how to do things, whenever I basically spoke to a colleague or a boss in terms of like, maybe this is the right move I want to play. Let's say this, I am not correct all the time, but I will say that the times that I have not listened to myself and listened to others, it went wrong. In the end, what I will say as well is that there's rarely yes or no answers, unless there's like maths and science involved. There's always multiple ways to do things. For myself, and I think for creative people, it's all about trying to find the one way for you, the one way that works. And what I want for everyone, designers included as well, is to listen less to so-called experts, because if you start listening to experts, that's when you start copying and start going into themes. Just do what you feel is right for yourself and the client, for your designs. That's probably why people win design awards, because they are basically going against the crowd. Your work won't be considered special if you're like the average. So you have to find ways to stand out. So, sum up. Try to use the creative and logical parts of the brain, preparedness, and the instinct. Be brave enough to act on what you feel is right.